Thank you, Professor Luscombe, for that interesting and informative talk. I'm sure we all had a great time going through the exciting world of polymers. And I can see quite a lot of questions coming in from our audience today. So without further delay, let's get started with the Q&A session. So the first question for you today is, one of our attendees would like to know, is it possible to predict the structure of these polymers via computational tools?
Yeah, so as you know in your question, the most popular way that we do this is using DFT. So for example, using Gaussian for the calculation. So yeah, that is the most common way that we do it. So things like predicting the structure, we can do on our own in-house using Gaussian. If it's anything a little bit more sophisticated, then we typically collaborate with others in order to do the calculation. But yes, in short, you can use DFT.
All right. Thank you, Professor Luscombe. Moving to the next question, some of our attendees would like to know how this synthesized semiconducting polymers compare to the traditional inorganic semiconductors in terms of environmental sustainability.
Yeah, so I guess comparing against some of so silicon would be a super common one. The problem with silicon is that it is extremely energy intensive in order to make a silicon-based device. So in that sense, the organic polymers are much more suitable. And then thinking about other types of like inorganic semiconductors, for example, like gallium-based ones or other types. Those ones are based on inorganic materials that are not particularly earth abundant, whereas organics is all carbon, hydrogen, so they're more earth abundant. So generally in terms of environmental sustainability, from the processing of the materials and also thinking about earth abundance of the elements involved, they are considered to be more sustainable. Sometimes people argue like the catalysts we use to make the materials like palladium or nickel, they're not particularly earth abundant, but then because it's a catalyst, we use so little of it in that sense. Yes, ideally we'd like to replace them, but less of a concern at this stage.
Thank you, Professor Luscombe. Another question coming in from our audience was, what are the primary criteria that we need to keep in mind while selecting the initiator molecule that is used for the synthesis of conjugated polymers?
Okay, so it depends on if you're using the method that I shared in my presentation, then there are criteria that are important to keep in mind. And maybe would you mind if I share my slide again to answer that question?
Yes, sure.
Sorry about that. So it's this one right here. One of the key things is actually to have an orphan at this place, and that really increases the stability of this initiator. If you don't have it, this is not very stable and we just don't get good initiation. So that is one key design feature that you should keep in mind. And so if the R is a methyl, you can add different things here, and the initiation should work relatively well. So I hope that answers your question.
Right.
And I'll stop sharing again.
Okay, moving to the next question. How does the metal catalyzed CH activation pathway in the direct arylation polymerization contribute to the preparation of high performance conjugated polymer materials?
Yeah, so it's to do with the defects that you end up introducing into the material. So say you try to make the same polymer using Suzuki coupling or Stille coupling. Those reactions tend to show a greater level of homocoupling, whereas in CH activation, you see less. And so there's been studies, papers that have been published, not by my group, but by other research groups, that have been able to show that if you make the same polymer using DARP compare it to Suzuki or Stili, then the dark polymer does show higher performance. So yeah, there are papers about that.
Okay. Moving to the next one. Some of our attendees would like to know, have you studied the optoelectronic properties of these semiconducting polymers?
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't share any of that side of our work that we do, but yeah, we analyze our polymers using UV vis absorption, take emission spectra. We usually fabricate our own organic field effect transistors and measure the charge mobility, and so on. So yeah, we do measure the optoelectronic properties as well.
All right. In the beginning, you mentioned that the major challenges are the multi-step reaction processes, and challenges lies in terms of reproducibility of this reaction or the synthetic route. So could you please share some of your perspective regarding commercialization of such high-performing semiconducting polymers?
So I don't know if you've purchased any of like the semiconducting polymers. And if you do, you often see just batch to batch variation. Like you buy one batch, a couple of months later you run out, so you order thinking that it's the same one. Quite often you actually get totally different molecular weights, and it's just not the same. So I think in order for large scale commercialization, we really need to make sure that batch to batch there is less variation for sure.
All right. Thank you, Professor Luscombe. Moving to the next question, some of us would like to know, is continuous flow synthesis feasible under these conditions?
Yeah. That's something that we want to explore, but we have not. There are papers about this, and people have been able to make semiconducting polymers using flow chemistry. So that is definitely something that people are looking at.
Okay. Another question related to that, what are some of the parameters that particularly affect the polydispersity index of polymers?
I guess I think I need a little bit of clarification. So the dispersity for just standard semiconducting polymer synthesis, Suzuki coupling or Stili coupling, that's just really inherent to the mechanism, and that like theoretical calculations show that if you do a step growth polymerization, you end up in theory with a dispersity of 2. To be honest, for those Stili or Suzuki polymerizations, we cannot control the dispersity. What you get is what you get. You can do things like prep GPC to try and purify and get sort of certain molecular weights, but there's no control over that for the standard way that you synthesize these.
Okay. Moving to the next one. Regarding the specificity, in case if there are more than 2 active sites available on the monomer, then how do we make sure of the specificity that we are targeting?
That's pretty tricky for sure. That's a tricky one to answer. So sometimes it really depends. So I mentioned that there's like one, if it's dark, we have one monomer that's functionalized and the other one that's not. So we actually usually pick the monomer that's unfunctionalized such that it only has one CH bond that can react. And the other one where there's too many choices, we halogenate that so that we can reduce extra ones. But that's a really tricky issue. Sometimes you can play tricks with, so the bond that activates is usually the most electron deficient one. So you can add electron withdrawing groups and so on to try and direct it. But that is not always desirable, because if you do that, it affects the final properties of your polymer. So it's a little bit tricky, but we usually try to carefully pick monomers so that we can avoid this situation.
All right. How does the cross dehydrogenative coupling method compare to the direct arylation polymerization method?
Oh, CDC, I wish it worked better. So it works great for the one particular monomer combination that I just showed, we have not really been able to get it to work very well with other monomers. So right now, from a practical point of view, DARP is just a lot more versatile. We'll keep working to make that CDC polymerization be more versatile as well.
Okay. Could you please share some insights regarding some of the challenges in terms of optimizing the general protocol for CH activation mediated polymerization reactions?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? Sorry, I'm trying
Yes,
to find
sure.
it too.
So what are some of the challenges that you might encounter while optimizing the general protocol for CH activation mediated polymerization reactions?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we find is that the monomers really don't react in with the way that we expect it to. So there's still a huge amount of trial and error that we do in terms of we try different catalysts, we try different ligands, we try different solvents. But yeah, we usually screen through the catalyst, the ligand that we use, and the solvent that we use. And usually the combination of that we'll be able to find something that works. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Professor Luscombe. Uh, I think we have few more questions. I can just quickly go through them. So, is there any target? Is there a molecular weight you are targeting for any particular sort of applications? So, what are the things that we need to keep in mind in terms of?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So in my presentation, I mentioned the need for tight chains in order to get good performance. And that is really a key issue, meaning that you need to have long enough polymers to have that tight chain. I would say at least 30 kilograms per mole is desirable. If you look in the literature, there are a lot of papers out there that show that the higher the molecular weight, the higher the charge mobility, higher the molecular weight, the higher the power conversion efficiency for photovoltaics as well. So generally, higher is good, and I would say at least 30K would be good.
All right. Uh, I think we can take one more question. What will the effect of any magnetic catalysts on this polymer synthesis? And will it have any consequences related to any applications that we are targeting in terms of device properties or photovoltaic efficiency?
Yeah, so I have to admit, I've never used a magnetic catalyst, but the presence of the metal absolutely will affect the performance. So even using just like a nickel or palladium-based systems, um, if the final polymer has any of those catalysts left behind, then yeah, the performance totally changes. So I imagine if it's magnetic, there'll be effects as well. So one of the important things that we need to do is to really purify the polymers after the synthesis to get rid of the catalyst as much as we are able to.
Okay. I think there is one interesting question from one of our attendees regarding the synthetic route. Do those reactions require to be carried out in an inert atmosphere or like a glove box setup?
So we use a Schlenkline in order to synthesize the polymers. So yeah, the reactions are water and air sensitive, so you have to use a dry solvent. And we usually do our reactions under nitrogen. Actually, I should add that the CDC, you do not need to use nitrogen. The CDC it is an actually oxidation reaction, so that you can do under air. But normal DARP, we do have to use in air conditions.
All right. I guess we are still having a lot of questions flooding in from our audience. But in the interest of time, we'll not be able to take any more questions. But again, thank you so much, Professor Liscombe, for that wonderful talk. And at the end, would you like to share any final remarks or take
Oh
home
yeah,
message?
yeah. Well, not so much final remarks, but an advertisement. So I'll just share my screen again. We are doing a big push to hire new faculty at our institute right now. And well, if you look at the ads, it doesn't specify subject areas, but we're actually really looking for chemists. So if you are looking for an independent faculty position, please do consider applying. The deadline is October 31st. But some attractive features, as I mentioned, it is English speaking, although we are in Japan. We have baseline funding to support all research groups. The students, postdoctoral researchers, lab technicians, and so on are fully funded by the institute. We don't have any departments, so we don't actually have a chemistry department. We do interdisciplinary research. Every faculty gets administrative support and so on and so forth. So it really is a pretty spectacular place. So if you're looking for faculty positions, do consider us. So that's my final thoughts. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and please feel free to email me personally if you have any questions.
Thank you, Professor Luscombe. With that, we are at the end of our Q&A session, and I would like to hand it over to Aparna.
So this brings us to the end of today's session. We hope that you all enjoyed this broadcast, and we invite you to view the edited recording from the past events in the ACS Science Talks library. At the end of the session, you will receive a brief survey. Kindly share your feedback with us so that we can continue to improve and serve you better. On behalf of all of us at ACS, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon for more ACS event. Until then, stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.